I'm never going to be the person who shows up and says, yes, Your Honor, we are ready to proceed with the jury. Not my role, but I am the person who can sit down with the plaintiff's lawyer and say, these are the 5 reasons why you're not going to get the kind of money you're looking for. So let's find a way that we can resolve the case, make your client happy and take care of you, but also make my client happy.
Hello and welcome to the Attorney Post, where we give you the inside scoop with top attorneys in their field. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with attorneys at the top of their game to help you navigate the various ins and outs of legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I'm actually very pleased to be joined by Sharla Frost. She is a Houston attorney whose career has taken her from the courtroom to a very highly selective practice that she runs now, doing things like negotiations, mediations, expert witness work, and helping attorneys make transitions in their lives. So this is going to be a little bit of a non-standard issue today, or non-standard episode, but I'm kind of excited to see where it goes because I don't come into these calls with any preconceived notions. I'm just always intrigued to meet people and hear their stories, and I think we're going to have a good talk. So Sharla, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's good to see you, Justin, and thank you for having me today.
My pleasure. Well, we're going to jump over before we get started and take a look at your website. And she has a great website with a great URL. It is Power at the Table. So again, she is a consultant. She does keynote. She does symposiums. She does virtual training to help attorneys as they're shifting to various stages in their life. So we're going to dive into all the stuff that she does. But you can learn more about Sharla's expertise. You can learn about her signature topics. You can do all these things on her website. She speaks, she talks, she reads, she writes, she does, I don't know, maybe poetry, all sorts of stuff. She's a woman of many talents, and she's got lots of great reviews, lots of people talking very highly about her and what she does, including it was a mayor up here that I see, four-term mayor of Essex Falls in New Jersey. That's pretty impressive, right? And this is one of her books, Power at the Table, which is, of course, the name of this website as well. So we're going to be talking to Sharla a lot today about what she does. Before we do that, though, as always, we are going to jump over and take a quick look at our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is SearchSift. Do you know why some legal clicks cost $100, $200, $300, even $500 or more inside of Google? It's not because Google has a magic expensive lawyer button. It's because Google Ads is an auction. When 5 or 10 or 20 law firms are bidding on the same high intent search, like car accident lawyer, divorce attorney, etc., the price goes up and up and up. And here's what most firms miss. Before someone ever clicks an ad, before they ever see the map pack, before they choose a law firm, Google's already shaping the search with autocomplete suggestions, and that's where SearchSift comes in. SearchSift helps position your firm or your business earlier in the search journey, inside of the predictive searches, before people make their decision. So instead of only fighting after the search happens for space on page 1, you start influencing intent even before the click. And the neat thing about SearchSift is you don't pay just to show up. You only pay when someone actually clicks and visits you from Google. So it's kind of like Google Ads, only it's less than half the cost, which is really neat. So if you're tired of paying for auction prices for every lead, maybe it's time to stop fighting where everyone else is fighting. Visit SearchSift, that's SYFT, searchsift.com, and see what your market looks like. Our second sponsor today is Rank with News. When somebody Googles you, your company, or your firm, what do they actually see? Is it just your website? Or do they see real credibility, authority, and trust? Because the businesses getting chosen today aren't just visible, they're validated. And that's where Rank with News comes in. Rank with News helps feature you, your firm, your business in major media outlets like Business Insider, Yahoo News, Yahoo Finance, AP News, and more, so that when prospects look you up, they don't just find you, they find that they trust you. This isn't about running more ads, it's about owning your reputation at the exact moment that it matters. Visit rankwith.news to learn more and speak with a associate. Sometimes you even speak with me because that's my company, as you guys know. Be happy to talk with you as well and see what we can do for you to get you on page 1. It actually is sometimes like instant SEO. It's one of the fastest ways to page 1. That's rankwith.news or rankwithnews.com. All righty, jumping back over to your website. So again, today I am joined by Sharla Frost. She is a Houston attorney whose career has taken her from the courtroom to a highly selective practice built around negotiation, counsel, expert witness work, and mediation. She has more than 35 years of litigation. She's actually 40 in our pre-interview. 40 years of litigation experience. She served as first chair trial counsel in more than 60 jury trials and has handled high-risk mass tort, commercial, and product liability cases across the country. She's also a speaker, an author, a career coach, and the former president of the Litigation Council of America. And she brings a fascinating perspective on what it looks like to build a trial career, the steps to take a new professional chapter in your life, and still stay right in the middle of high stakes legal strategies at the same time. So we're gonna have a really interesting conversation today. That was a mouthful, and I don't think I even scratched the surface. So Sharla, my very first question to you was just this: what did I miss? Tell me who you are, what makes you tick, uh, paint the full picture of you.
Well, I grew up in Frogville, Oklahoma. I'm a fourth generation Frogvillian on one side of the family and a fifth generation on the other, and a first generation trial lawyer. So I did not grow up in a household with a professional background. So I've got to make it up on my own as I've gone along. I still do client work. I gave up courtroom work just before COVID. My timing was perfect. Rarely in life does your timing work out perfectly, but I had decided that I was done with spending 300 nights on the road every year and weeks at a time in a hotel room. And I decided I would do something different. And then COVID hit. So I never had to do a Zoom trial, for example. Uh, but I decided I'd do something different. And I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but it has turned out to be tremendous fun. I get to use all those trial skills, negotiating with lawyers that I had fought against for years. And I do some expert witness work for clients. I get calls from lawyers I had litigated against saying, would you look at my case and tell me what's wrong with it? And then they argue with me when I tell them what's wrong with it. But it's been really interesting, and I've had wonderful opportunities to do things I wouldn't have thought about doing. I also write children's books, the Frogville Quest series, which is a series of fairy tales with the main character. It's a 13-year-old girl trying to find her way through life and figure out what she's going to do. And that's been wonderful fun. And the real fun of the children's books has been the opportunity to meet people and have adventures myself that I would have never done while practicing law. So I have adult ADD, as you probably figured out. So I'm always doing something.
I call that adult onset ADD, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know you authored a book. So there is Sharla Frost's Frogville, Quest of a Frog.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
it's a series. There are 7 of them so far, and we're getting ready to publish number 8. I'm collaborating with Mo Rock, who is the CEO of the LA Tribune, something I didn't even know existed, and a person I would have never had the opportunity to meet unless I was litigating with or against him. So it's a perfect example of how things are different in the life that I do currently. But book 8 is about the lost boys from Neverland who are now foster children. And the foster children issue is a big issue in this country and is a really big focus for Mo Rock. So I was flattered to be asked to collaborate with him on this. And that book will launch sometime probably in the next 30 days.
Oh, fascinating. I didn't know this aspect of it. I didn't catch this in all of my my pre-roll research and everything. So that's really kind of very cool. Well, so let's talk a little bit more about what you're doing these days. Give me, I guess, a pitch. You kind of told me who you help. You kind of told me what you're doing, but give me your pitch. Why should somebody come to you? What are they coming to you for, and what do you help them do specifically? And mediation, looking over cases and stuff. But tell me specifically about what you're doing these days, and who's coming to you, who's finding you, and why are they finding you?
Sure. I still represent corporate clients. So my work historically was for Fortune 50 or Fortune 10 corporate clients doing high stakes litigation defense for them. And these days, those same clients come to me and ask me to do settlement negotiations for them on high risk cases. So I get calls to deal with difficult plaintiffs' lawyers. There is something about having had a trial against someone where you won that gives you credibility with the other side. So I get the call asking if I can talk to John Doe about XYZ case because someone who is handling the case on the litigation side has not been able to make progress in getting the case resolved. And in my view, those are two very distinct issues. You've got trial lawyers and you've got settlement lawyers. When I was the trial person, my job was to win that case. My job was not to settle the case. In my current role, my job is to settle the case. I'm never going to be the person who shows up and says, yes, Your Honor, we are ready to proceed with the jury. Not my role, but I am the person who can sit down with the plaintiff's lawyer and say, these are the 5 reasons why you're not going to get the kind of money you're looking for. So let's find a way that we can resolve the case, make your client happy and take care of you, but also make my client happy and take care of their risk profile. So that's why people call me. I have that what I would call long tail litigation experience. And that gives me a different insight and a different bit of credibility than some other people might have.
Gotcha. That's fascinating. It's kind of neat to see the way that you've kind of moved and shifted and transitioned all that as well. So I got to ask you, what got you into law? Were you a little girl raised on Perry Mason and you just knew that law was what you wanted to do? Is it something you stumbled into and found you had an aptitude for? And then once you got into law, what got you into the areas that you practice?
Well, I would start with heavens no, I was not that kid. I was going to be a secretary. My favorite aunt was a legal secretary, and I was going to be a secretary. My high school counselor's favorite sister was an executive secretary for a petroleum executive. So I was all set up. I'm going to be a secretary. Let's just say the profession was saved. I think I would have been a terrible secretary. But when I was a senior in high school, my high school principal was an old used up lawyer who had gone back to school and gotten a PhD in education. He didn't like practicing law, but he loved kids. So he was and he also hated politics. So he was a one-termer wherever he went, every little school. He liked rural schools, but every one was a one-year assignment. And I got lucky. My senior year, he was our principal. And he had called me during the summer. He went through the files of every kid in school because, of course, lawyers do that. And it was a small school, so 200 kids. He had read everybody's file. And I got a call from the secretary saying, you have an appointment at 2:00 on Wednesday. And I'd never been in the principal's office in my life. I was a good kid. And I certainly wasn't going to do that during the summer. But when I showed up, he wanted to know what I was going to do. And I said, well, I'm going to be a secretary. And he said, I don't think so. I'm teaching a law class, the last class of the day, and you're going to take it. And he hand chose kids to take his class. And at the end of the first semester, he sat me down and said, okay, you're planning to go to college. What are you going to do? And I said, I thought we had this discussion. I'm going to be a secretary. And he said, no, you're going to have a secretary. You're going to go to law school. And I was not good at math, so I wasn't going to be a business major, and I didn't have any athletic ability, so it wasn't like I was going to get an athletic scholarship. So he gets the credit for having pointed me to law school, and it worked out. I like to write, I like to talk. That's how I got there.
And then once you got through law school, what did the beginning of your career look like?
Well, I started at Fulbright and Jaworski in Houston. I wanted to be a trial lawyer. When I got to college, I was fortunate. I was on a full academic scholarship. Also, credit to the principal. He was aware of that and made sure that I applied. And I got lucky and was one of 15 kids on what they now call an honor scholarship. But it was the Parsons Scholarship. It was named after Dr. David Parsons, who was a pharmacist, Choctaw Indian pharmacist out in West Texas. And he left his estate to the local university to fund what was really a liberal arts education. So there I am, I'm in college. I'm walking down the hallway one day and I see a poster that says, full ride scholarship, Baylor Law School, former debaters. It's like, I don't have any money. I'd like to go to law school. Maybe I could be a debater. So I went to the debate coach and said, I'd like to debate. And to his credit, he didn't throw me out when he asked where I had gone to high school, because it was a very small rural school. We didn't have that program. And I had never seen a debate round. But my roommate was a debater. My boyfriend was a debater. I told the coach, I said, it can't be that hard. I was wrong, but to his credit, he said, "Okay, you can come to a meeting." And 2.5 years later, with lots of work, and it was much harder than I ever expected, I got that scholarship, and off to Baylor I went. And I thought I would be a trial lawyer, and off to Fulbright I went, and it turned out I did like trials. I didn't like Fulbright. It was too big. Fabulous firm, and they gave me wonderful additional training. But there were 1,000 lawyers at the firm at the time I was there. And the place that I grew up in, Oklahoma, had less than 1,000 people in a 5-mile area. So
Yeah.
not a perfect fit.
I live in Atchison, Kansas, which is 7 square miles and about 12,000 people, give or take. And I understand the draw to living in a small. I mean, we're in a suburb of a suburb of Kansas City. If you're 45-minute drive into the city or whatever. So a lot of people are like, oh, you're Kansas City adjacent, but we're really just kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's nice. So I can definitely respect that. So you spent years debating in the courtroom. You spent years as a trial lawyer, and now you're shifting a little bit. So tell us about what has led you to shift.
Well, trial work is fabulous, and there is nothing like the rush that you get when the jury comes back and your side wins. There's also very little that is worse than when the jury comes back and your side lost.
Mhm.
And if you are a real trial lawyer, you've won some you should have lost, and you've lost some you should have won. That's just the nature of it. Juries do what juries are going to do, and juries have a sense of what's right most of the time. I think they get it right most of the time. That doesn't mean you're always happy with it, but that is a very intense way to live. And I did repetitive litigation, and I did it all over the country. So I was the person who got a call on Friday saying, we're going to trial on Monday. What time can you be there on Sunday? I may have seen the case. I may not have seen the case. I may know the lawyers locally. I may not know them. I got to know some wonderful people around the country because I was parachute girl. I get dropped in on Sunday, and congratulations, this person is going to take over your case. You've done all this work, but you can sit there. You can be second chair. She's going to take the front. And that's lovely, but it's very tiring. And you reach a point where, particularly with repetitive litigation, you're never going to move the needle. You'll win one, you'll lose one. You win 10, the next one that you lose wipes out all of the gains you made in the first 10. But they are valuable for the individuals, they're valuable for the clients, but they're exhausting for the lawyers. And I just reached a point where I didn't need to do that anymore. I was never going to be on the Supreme Court. By the way, never wanted to be a judge. Doesn't matter what court. Not my idea of fun. But nothing I was doing was really going to make earth-shattering changes. And I don't have children, and my parents were getting older. So I had the ability to take some time and do something different. And I decided it was time. Sometimes it's just time, and it was time for me. So that's what I did.
You've mentioned on your website, I think, and a little bit in our pre-roll as well, that I don't know, you thought you'd miss the courtroom, but I'm assuming, found the current mix of work challenging, but with fewer road miles. What I don't know how to say this. I guess what surprised you the most about this transition you've made?
I guess the biggest surprise for me was that I really don't miss the courtroom because I liked being in trial and I loved the give and take. And I had fabulous people I worked with. I had really interesting people that I litigated against. Some of my adversaries turned out to be very good friends of mine. That's kind of the nature of trial people. Trial lawyers are sort of a subset of humanity, not necessarily a good subset, depending on who you ask, but there's a lot of similarities. So you get to know those people. And I thought I would miss both the camaraderie and the intensity of the experience. As it turns out, I miss the camaraderie a little bit, but I still get a lot of that as part of my current practice. And I don't miss the never being able to be in control of my calendar. Judges have their schedules, and judges' schedules are your schedules, whether that's convenient or not. And so that's something that I didn't expect would be such a change for me. It turns out I actually kind of like routine. Who knew? I've never had one. So it's been an interesting transition, but I was quite surprised at how I don't miss the call to be in front of the jury and dealing with new judges and new locations. So I really did think I would miss that, and I don't.
Makes sense. Um, One of my favorite questions to ask, just because I think you can learn a lot about somebody by how they deal with failure. And of course, you step up to bat enough times, nobody bats 1,000. You said yourself, you win some cases you thought you're going to lose, you lose some cases you thought you're going to win. That's just life. Um, but every time we fail, as long as we learn from it, obviously it's a slow burn win at the end of the day. Can you let my listeners, Charlotte, know about a time in your legal career when you failed, when you had a setback that you really just didn't even understand, blindsided you maybe, but what did you learn from it, and how did you carry that forward to make sure that you were a better person and you were representing your clients better, or whatever it happened to be? How did you incorporate that failure into yourself in such a way that it made you better?
Well, I think probably the biggest failure I could identify, and when you say blindsided, that that really is true. We were what you call a captive law firm for a large corporation that had a tremendous amount of litigation, and we managed their Texas litigation. They had trials every Monday in at least 4 different cities in the state, and we fielded trial teams, not all from our firm. I had a small firm at the time. Uh, but I was in trial, and I got a call on a Sunday afternoon saying, "Great news! We just filed for bankruptcy." They owed us 6 months worth of billings. We didn't have any other work. I Fortunately, the rent was paid, but we didn't have any money. We were topped out on the line of credit. It was a failure, not so much on a personal basis, but it was a huge business failure. We had not appropriately taken account of the possibility that they were not going to be around. So you learn from something like that. You can either roll up and die, which really wasn't an option. I mean, we owed a lot of money, and we had people who worked for us, and we had wonderful people who worked for us. We had a lot of non-traditional employees, single mothers, and people that had gotten a GED, and then we had trained them. So we had people who were really dependent on us. And after the sort of the nuclear fallout, because it was truly devastating, you step back and think, what should we have done differently and what could we have done differently? And so we did, and we broadened our base, and we looked at ways to better control cost and things like that. And we were doing fabulously right until tort reform went swept through Texas, which is a whole different issue. But again, that was a failure of a business, but you learn from it. And that was something that was out of our control, but you also learn from that, because if things are out of your control, you have to be it's not complacent, but you have to be able to internalize that and figure out, what do you do next? Because you have to do something next. And many people who faced that same issue just sort of curled up and didn't do something next. But life is about what happens when you're making other plans, as Woody Allen so famously said. So you just deal with it. Those were very difficult issues. In terms of trials I lost a $5 billion trial. That would have been great for my career if I had been on the other side of that. On the other hand, I was trial girl. It was a bankruptcy confirmation. And I didn't design the plan. I was not the creator of that. And you have to go home and lick your wounds and think, what would I have done differently in that case? And you get ready for the next one and move on.
How do you do that, by the way? Like, how do you just say, well, and maybe that's what it is. I did my best, and the law is the law, and it is what it is, and juries are juries, and how do you stop licking your wounds and just move on?
Well, first of all, you go home and you whine and complain and rant and rave to anyone who will listen about the injustice of how it all happened, and you was robbed. I was always robbed. Uh, and then you think about it, and at the end of the day, as the trial lawyer, your job is to give your client the best service you can possibly give and be their strongest advocate. And if you have done that, then that's really all you can do. And you have to be able to step back and separate yourself from the client, because you are not the client. Your job is to carry the ball for the client. And I have a very good friend who is a professional football player, and he talks about how you go back and think about how you didn't get the ball down the field and this and that. And in some ways, it's similar if you're the trial lawyer, but nothing is more devastating than to lose that case that you just knew you were going to win. You had it. And then at the end of the day, you didn't. But if you did everything right, sometimes you don't win. And that's the hard part of being a trial lawyer. And that is the part that a lot of people are not able to deal with as a trial lawyer.
That's what.
Many people, they do one trial and then they're done. It's like, that was terrible. I'm never going to do that again. But if you like the process and you're good at the process and you're willing to do the work, you're going to win some. You're not going to win them all.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. So let me ask you the flip side of that, though. Obviously, and we all deal with failure. It's just part of life, but we also have successes. What's one or two of the moments in your career, maybe trials, maybe in your shift as well, or people you've helped, but what's a couple of the proverbial feathers in your cap, the things you're most proud of when you're laying your head down at night, you're falling asleep, and you're thinking back on the day or the week, the month, the year, your life, and you're like, oh, I'm so glad that worked out. What's one or two of the things you're most proud of in your career?
Well, that yeah, that's a fun question. I've never had that question before. Um, I loved being president of Litigation Counsel of America. In terms of feathers in the cap, that was a fabulous experience. Those are great, great lawyers, and they're all trial lawyers. Some of them are plaintiffs' lawyers, some of them are defense lawyers. And like I mentioned earlier, that's just a kind of a different breed of people. So to get the opportunity to stand in front of them and sort of, shepherd them along in what you're doing, that was really terrific. I also got to give a keynote speech to the Defense Research Institute once. I had an audience of 1,500 people who got to listen to me talk about how to pick a jury. Now, the kicker to that is I was the first speaker on Friday morning after the cocktail party the night before, always a bad sign. And it was the morning that they were having a golf tournament. But it rained that morning, so no one could go play golf, and everybody was already up after. They either were still up from the cocktail party the night before, or they had gotten up to play golf. And so I had the opportunity to talk to 1,500 of my nearest and dearest friends in that bar, and that was great fun. In terms of trials that I won, one of the most satisfying ones, there were really two. As a very young lawyer, and it would have been 1989, so I was, I don't know, however old I was. I was first chair in a case that involved 289 individual plaintiffs, not a class action and not really a consolidation. They were all tried at the same time, tried together. And I got to be first chair for my client. And that was amazing. There I am, I'm a baby lawyer. I'm a girl. Very few women get the opportunity to be those first chairs. So that was really terrific. And that was a wonderful opportunity that my client and my firm gave me. So that was kind of an amazing experience. Then towards the end of my career, my trial team and I won the first one of the Johnson & Johnson baby powder mesothelioma cases. And we were the defense verdict of the year from one of the rating groups. And that was cool. That it's always nice to be recognized for something like that. And those are tough cases. That's a tough case to defend. And we had excellent counsel on the other side. So those were highlights of things that I did.
That's awesome. So vaguely related, and maybe my favorite question to ask sometimes. I find that attorneys deal with a lot of absurdity as well. Maybe it's courtroom drama or a judge that goes awry. Maybe it's just a situation a client brought to you, or, there's so many places, especially when you've had, 35, 40 years of trial practice and everything else. I'm sure you've seen some real just things that make you stop and and wonder about humanity. But that sometimes makes for some of the best podcast fodder as well. So, what's one or two of the most absurd things, Sharla, that you've encountered in your legal career?
Well, let's see. I tried a case in New Orleans, probably third of the way through my career. And we had a person on the jury who was actually homeless. I don't have any idea how that person got a jury notice. I certainly don't understand how she ended up on the jury. She, by the way, was the most dedicated juror because they got breakfast and lunch every day. So she was always there. But I could never figure out how in the world did a homeless person end up on my jury. And she did, was still there. We ended up settling about 2/3 of the way through the case. And I don't know what happened after that, but yeah, that was kind of crazy. And then I was in a courtroom in rural Mississippi where the judge, who played poker, by the way, with the plaintiff's lawyers once a week, let's just say he didn't like out-of-towners and he didn't like women. He also didn't like attorneys of color. So I was asked to go in and handle a hearing. It was a big deal hearing. My local counsel was an African-American guy, fabulous guy, wonderful lawyer. Judge didn't like him. I'm a chick from out of town. He doesn't know me. So, I show up and the only thing he wants to talk about is when can he call me for dinner when he comes to Houston next? And it's like, let me know whenever you're going to be there. I was going to make sure I was out of town whenever that was, but he did. It was very Southern, very very nice. So there are always weird things that happen, particularly if you're coming in from out of town. You're that strange person. And then there was the judge who wanted to set me up with his single son. I've never seen anyone more embarrassed in my life. It was very kind of the judge. It was very, very sweet of him. He had identified me out in the courtroom. The only thing I had said that day was, "Thank you, Your Honor," when he granted my pro hoc. So he has the clerk come and get me. We have to go back into his chambers, which, by the way, I understood to have been monitored by the FBI. They thought he was corrupt. I don't know if he was or not, but he was very proud of his single son, and they didn't have very many single women lawyers in that area. So he had son come over to meet me, and it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. The poor son was mortified.
That that's kind of funny. I had one of my guests tell me at one point they had a judge pull a gun on them. That's probably the most absurd thing, but I think having a judge try and like set you up. I mean, especially I'm assuming it didn't happen in the middle of a trial, like, oh, by the way, but I mean, even still, like that's kind of funny. I like that. Judges are people too.
They are, and he was a lovely father, and he treated me very well professionally. The fact that his son didn't ask me out was beneficial to all of us.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, you've handled mass tort cases, you've handled commercial cases, product liability cases. You're involved in the famous baby powder incident, Johnson& Johnson. Um, what makes those cases uniquely difficult?
I think the hardest thing about them is that since I was always a defendant, I represented a corporate defendant in all of the cases that I handled. The other side has a real human being, and with very few exceptions, those are real human beings who are facing personal tragedy of some sort or another. They are injured, they've suffered something, not necessarily caused by my client. That's a different issue. But from a jury standpoint, those sociological issues are very difficult. And I think that's the hardest thing about those kinds of cases is getting the jurors to step back and be objective about the legal issues, because jurors sit and they see those people in the courtroom all day, every day, and they are naturally sympathetic. And the instructions from the pattern jury charges are you have to set aside bias, prejudice, and sympathy on behalf of the individual plaintiff and treat both sides equally. And for human beings, that's really hard to do. So that makes those cases very, very difficult. Convincing a jury to disregard the clear suffering of a plaintiff, even if my defense client is not responsible, is just really hard, and it's understandable.
Yeah. So we're getting a little choppy all of a sudden. I don't know if that's my internet or yours. It's the internet being the internet. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm going to jump back over and talk about your book for a minute. So you've written a number of books, obviously. The one that you seem to highlight, the one that your website is built around is Power at the Table. What is that book all about and who should read it?
Power at the Table was my attempt to help female lawyers do business development. When I was running my own law firm and when I was a partner at other law firms, one of the things that's really important is that you have to have your own business. If you're going to have control of your life and control of your docket, which is the same thing if you're a lawyer, you have to have your own clients. Unless you want to work for someone else for your whole career, you got to find a way to develop business. And I found out how to do it by trial and error. There were not resources for that. So once I retired and COVID had hit, I thought, I'll just compile all the stuff that I put together. I trained people for years, trained my lawyers. I'll just put that together and we'll put it in a book and teach people how to do that themselves, teach women how to do that for themselves. And I was going to do training and I was going to do speaking. And well, then there was that little tiny COVID pandemic thing. So that didn't really help. Yeah, that tiny little thing. But what happened is that I discovered that men didn't want to buy a book that said specifically on the front that it's for women lawyers. The advice, of course, is essentially the same, but Power at the Table 2 is the same concept repackaged and reworked for lawyers in a more generic sense. And then the third version of it is power at the table for the entrepreneur. But my view is that a seat at the table is meaningless unless you have some power once you get there. You've got to have clients. You've got to have something that you bring to the table. You've got to bring value to your company, to your firm. And if you can do that, then you have power within your organization. If you don't do that, you're just you're just a widget. You're just a worker bee.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. What's something that you wish younger lawyers, maybe especially women lawyers, understood earlier about building a book of business for their firm or building their firm up?
I wish that lawyers were trained in law school to understand the business of law. People talk about it's a profession, it's not a business, and that there are true aspects to both of those. But in order to make a law firm work, which means you pay salaries, you provide benefits, you pay the partners, you pay rent, you take care of insurance, all of those sorts of things, someone has to bring money in the door. And to do that, you have to have clients and you have to have something you can provide to clients. I tell people you can't sell anything unless you have something to sell. So you've got to have some basic experience and credibility, but you must learn to find those ways that you can provide value to clients who are willing to pay you for it. I mean, it's great to provide pro bono work. That's fabulous for the profession and it's fabulous for society, but doesn't pay the bills. And the same is true of work that keeps you busy, but doesn't bring money in the door. And we don't train people to do that. We expect them to do that, but we don't train them to do that. And that was really the concept between the Power at the Table books. Someone needs to train lawyers on how to do that. So I describe my books as a 12-step system, and how to identify what you're good at and figure out what is a reasonable basis for presenting to a client and asking them to both hire you and pay you. But that's a skill set most lawyers don't have. I'm sure, as you're aware, the profession identifies finders, minders, and grinders. The rainmakers who find work, the minders who take care of it and organize things, and the grinders. And you don't want to be a grinder any longer than you have to be. But there are people that are perfectly happy to do that. And you need to figure out where you fit on that spectrum. But if you are going to be a force in your law firm, you have to have your own work.
That makes perfect sense. If you were to take what you think is your single best of your, you said it's like a 12 steps, right? So if there was one particular step that you could right now impart to the listeners, the thing that's going to move the needle for them faster than anything else and encourage them, maybe even say, hey, I need to get the other 11, let me get this book. What's that one step?
Consistency. You have got to be consistent. You have to have contact with the people that you do work with. You have to follow up and you have to provide them what they're looking for. But you can't do that scattershot. I tell people if it isn't on the calendar for a lawyer, it is never going to happen. You've got to have that same consistency approach for business development and client development that you do for all of the things that you do on their behalf. So I had something on my calendar every Monday. When I was running my own law firm and I was doing a lot of business development, I did something every Monday. And Monday is good because it's early in the week. Tuesday's probably better because people get inundated on Monday, so they may never see that fabulous email. But it doesn't have to be a big thing. If you've seen, and it doesn't need to always be about business. I tell people you have to walk that fine line between persistent versus stalker. You want to keep in contact, but you don't want to overdo it. So you're doing something, but it has to be something that provides value. It's not just, hey, I'm in your inbox again. Why don't you send me something to do? That is not helpful, particularly for corporate clients. They're busy. When I was in law school, everybody wanted to be an in-house lawyer because that was posh, and you didn't work very hard, and that was the easy stuff. That if that was ever true, it's certainly not true now. Staffing is leaner, people have more to do. They don't have time to deal with needy outside lawyers on top of everything else, but they do have time for people to provide value to them that makes their lives easier. Here's a great article on XYZ that I know is right in your wheelhouse, and I wasn't sure if you had seen it. The top line summary is blah. Feel free to read all 75 pages if you want, but if you need more on this, call me. That's helpful. Sending them just something to send something, not helpful. But you have to be consistent. Be that resource for them that they need.
No, that makes sense. That's good advice. Well, we're already coming to the bottom of the hour. It's been a good conversation so far, and I feel like we've barely even scratched the surface. I had a whole list of other questions, but I want to be respectful of your time and our listeners as well. So here in a minute, I'm going to ask you my three closing questions. I'll give them to you now so you can percolate on them, then we'll jump over and take another look at your site. Question number one is going to be, if you could change with a magic wand one thing about what you're doing right now, one thing about your current practice as it exists, what would you change with that magic wand, and why? Number two, we go back in time without breaking the space-time continuum. We meet young Sharla, maybe fresh out of law school, and you can give yourself one piece of advice other than the obvious. Buy this thing called Bitcoin. Trust me, it's coming. Or, it's 40 years ago. Buy this thing called Amazon. It's coming. There's lots of things back then. But what advice would you give to yourself, and why? And then number three is, if I gave you this magic pen. Now, this is my magic pen. I'm going to give a shout out. This is from a Benedictine monastery in Kansas, St. Benedict's Abbey. I'm going to give them a free shout out. It's kansasmonks.org. But one of the priests at this abbey seems to have blessed this pen because it has miraculous powers. It can strike a law from the book, it can edit a law, or add a new law. But unfortunately, it's almost out of ink, so you can only make one change. If I gave you this miraculous legal pen and you could make that one change, what change would you make and why? While you percolate on those, I'm going to jump over and we're going to show your site one more time. I've bounced over here a couple times. It's a nice, bright, rather engaging site. It does looks pretty good. So again, I'm talking with Sharla Frost, Sharla J. Frost, and she runs powerathetable.com, amongst other things. She does speaking, she does consulting, she writes books, she writes children's books, she does all sorts of stuff. I even saw Victor David Hansen seems to like your Frogville series, so now I'm really intrigued. I have a young girl we have 5 kids, but my 12-year-old is quite the reader. She's a voracious reader. In I have a 7-year-old as well who's just now like really coming online with reading. She just graduated out of first grade into second, so she's like all of a sudden understanding that words are a thing and she can read, and she now wants to read as well. So what age is Frogville targeted at, if I can ask?
Yeah, they're targeted for 7 and up, and they're chapter books. So if you're familiar with Alice in Wonderland and things of that nature, they're more akin to that. Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know. I might have to pick up a copy and just see if my girls see how they feel about it, because this is, again, something new to me. One of the reasons I love doing this podcast is I just learn new things and learn about things that I've never heard of before. I'd never encountered this series before, but I've got some voracious little readers, and summer is upon us. So at the very least, I'm going to see if our library has it, but I might have to pick up a copy or two off of Amazon. You guys can do the same thing. We'll put a link to her books in the description below. So if you want to pick up the books that Sharla has written, go down below, and you can get them at our website, or you can go to Amazon and get them there as well. We'll put links to those. Our final sponsor for today is Groove Pages, and we don't have the correct URL in here anymore, but that's okay. If you want to pick up a copy of Groove Pages, it is free. You just go to theattorneypost.com/groove. That's theattorneypost.com/groove. Running an online business shouldn't mean paying for 12 different tools before you've ever made a sale, and that's why Groove exists. Groove gives entrepreneurs, creators, and marketers one platform for funnels, checkouts, emails, memberships, e-commerce, blogs, webinars, affiliates, automations, and more. No credit card, card, no trial that flips, no monthly service software bill that just to get even started, right? Groove is literally free to use. They only earn a small percent of commission off of everything that you sell. So that's how they fund their platform, which is fascinating because I regularly pay. I'm a marketer by trade. I have a number of these that I pay for, and I also use Groove. And I will say I have found Groove very easy to use in general, particularly for setting up, simple websites and one pagers and funnels and everything else. Very quick, very fast loading. So I'm not just endorsing them because they're a sponsor. I'm actually endorsing them because I think it actually works. I don't know if your website, by the way, Charlotte, is written on Groove or not, but you're welcome to give them a try as well. It's completely free. Like I said, just go to theattorneypost.com/groove so you can stop duct taping together your business with expensive subscriptions. Try something that actually works. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove today to get started. So that is our final sponsor for today. All right, so Sharla, number one, I give you a magic wand, and with this magic wand, you can change one thing about your practice as it exists right now. What's the one thing you would change?
The one thing I would change is I would probably have an assistant. My current assistant, who is me, not as good as the technology as I would like for her to be.
I thought
So
I saw
that
your assistant moving around in
learning.
the background. Looks like a maybe a black lab or a mastiff or something.
Oh, that's my black kitty cat. That's Elmer. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can't see how big it is because of the blur. It looked large, but it also could he could be used right behind you. I couldn't quite tell. So that's not your assistant though.
No, no. Well,
Not a very tech heavy cat.
as an assistant, he's not any better than I am. So yeah,
Fair enough.
I would have one of those wonderful assistants I had through the years. Yeah.
There you go. Well, you said you wanted to be a legal secretary at one point. So here's your chance. You got to find that secretary again, right? You got to find that ideal person who can do all the things. But good luck with that. Question number two. We go back in time. We meet young Charlotte, and you're able to give yourself just one piece of advice at the beginning of your career. What's that one piece of advice that you would give yourself?
I would tell myself to do more on learning about the business at the front end because I didn't have an appreciation of that as a baby lawyer, and I think that would have made a big difference for me. So that's one of the reasons that I did the books because I think that's something that I was missing as a baby lawyer, and that's something I would change.
What's fascinating is I've asked a lot. I've done this podcast for years now. I've interviewed a couple hundred attorneys probably, and one of the most consistent answers I get is that learn the business side because as a lawyer you're not taught the business side, and so when they start, and most of the attorneys I talk to, not all of them, but most of them are either solopreneurs or they're the chief, their name is on the masthead at the very least, and so they had to learn that at some point, and a lot of times it's a struggle to learn those things. So it's interesting. That's actually one of the more consistent pieces of advice people would like to give themselves that I hear. So it makes sense. And of course, now you've sort of transitioned to doing exactly that and helping other people do that. So it's a very natural thing to do, which is kind of neat to see. Okay, so the heavens open, the suns ray down, and the angel choirs sing, and I give you the miraculous pen. It's almost out of ink, but you can make one change, Charlotte. What change would you make and why?
I would eliminate HIPAA. HIPAA, which is the Privacy Act. It was well intentioned, but bureaucratically a nightmare. And for the kind of cases that I handled and that I still negotiate, HIPAA is a huge, difficult pain that doesn't really accomplish much, in my view. We've made it impossible to know anything about people's individual stories. So, when I was a kid, they published the list of people who were in the hospital. So if you saw somebody you knew, you could go and visit them and take them flowers. We don't have any of that stuff anymore because HIPAA prevents us from doing that. And it hasn't made life better, but it makes litigation an absolute nightmare because you've got to have processes and procedures, and you've got to fill out forms, and depending on where you are, it's just a huge headache. So that one would go away.
It's interesting because I mean, again, I view HIPAA as a positive thing. I like, oh, I want my privacy protected, but I never really thought about the, A, is it actually doing its job and doing it well? B, and I do remember I grew up in the 80s. I remember our local newspaper. I'd forgotten that I knew this, but I remember there was a little section of here's people in the hospital. And my church bulletin, I think, still does that actually. It's like, but it's members saying, hey, pray for so and so or whatever. But like, and I don't think they're under HIPAA. I think it's the family requesting it, so they get around it because it's an intentional request. But like I do remember that being a thing, and I'd forgotten that I knew that that was a thing until right now. And I'm like, I do remember that. Was it like I just googled it really quickly. 96 was under Clinton that HIPAA became a thing, I guess. So I guess I even grew up in a pre-HIPAA world. I didn't even realize it. My young teenage formative years were in a pre-HIPAA world and then a HIPAA adopting world or whatnot. I honestly I never stopped to think about HIPAA before in a meaningful way. It's part of the air that I breathe, right? You just assume, oh, HIPAA, that's a thing. But yeah, no, that really it's a newer thing. So it's interesting. I would love to I'd love to have another. I mean, maybe have to have you on just to talk about that at some point. Have you back because I want to know what changes you would make. Because again, from an outside perspective, it feels like it's a good idea, but then I totally get what you're saying. That there's got to be the best intended law still sucks sometimes.
Yes, and that's certainly true of that one. I think it has isolated people in a way that it didn't intend. And it probably has protected some information, but at the end of the day, it created a huge bureaucratic nightmare for law firms and medical facilities. And nurses are terrified of saying something that might get them in trouble because, oh, it's a HIPAA violation. And it's not really that helpful at the end of the day. There has to be an easier way to do that. So yeah, my least favorite federal regulation.
That's fascinating. That's interesting. Well, Charlotte, thank you very much for being on the podcast. I'd always like to let my guest have the final word. Are there any last words of wisdom or parting thoughts you'd like to leave our guests with, our listeners?
Well, thank you again for having had me on. I always enjoy talking about the law and the intersection with real life. Uh, check out my books. The children's books are fun. They're wholesome. They're not political. Lily, my protagonist, is neither a victim nor an advocate. She's just a 13-year-old girl trying to figure out life. And at the end of the day, we may all be 13-year-old girls trying to figure out life. It just that process never changes.
That is Frogville, Quest of a Frog, and the related. There's now eight sequels to this. You're working on the eight.
Yeah, seven already published, and number eight
Number eight is
is
on.
in the launch phase. Yeah.
Huh. That is really interesting. And there's a prologue. You guys can even read it, get a little snippet, and see how that intrigues you. That's interesting.
Yeah, Lily turns into a frog. That's the kicker. When she turns 13, her brother was supposed to turn
What a
into
name.
a frog, and she did instead, and has to go on a quest to get a royal kiss to turn back into a girl. And well, it's complicated, but it's fun.
That's fascinating. I'm gonna have to put that on my summer reading list. I like that a lot. Well, again, Charlotte, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This is Justin West with the Attorney Post. I have been chatting law and all things related to it, and also some literature stuff with Sharla Frost. She is the brains behind at the table. Powerathetable.com. As always, we'll have a link to all of her stuff down below. Though we've been talking about legal stuff, as a reminder, this podcast does not constitute legal advice, and if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. If you're an attorney, you're looking to transition in your life in particular, or if I have to assume that people in the multi-billion dollar Fortune 10, Fortune 50 companies, they know who you are. I don't think you need a whole lot of help probably getting those people to find you. But if somebody's watching this and you find yourself in that predicament and you need someone like Charla on your team, reach out and get a hold of her. I think she'd be a wonderful asset for you, obviously. As far as the podcast goes, if you're watching us on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you know someone that would benefit from this information, please share it with them, because at the end of the day, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any attorney. And anytime we can help people become more informed about their rights, we make the world a better place. Until next time, this is Justin, your host, saying thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.